not about you, it's about Him. Could you help me kind of today, if you'd oblige me? Would you just turn to that person next to you and say, it's not about you? Would you say that? It's not about you? Yeah. Yeah. I'm saying that to myself today, so... Hey, there's a little insert in your program. If you want to take that, fill that out, that would be awesome. We had a little prayer on the back that we'll be reading here in just a minute. So if you want to take that, that would be great. Thank you for doing that. We have been in a series that's called "That Could Never Happen to Me." And the reason that we say stuff like "that could never happen to me" is because we really believe it. And then it happens. And then it's like, well, that happened to me. I can't believe that happened to me. So we just need to be reminded over and over again that God is in control, and the things that we think could never happen to us can and do happen to us all the time. And so today, we're going to learn, again, a very, very simple lesson that I hope you'll take with you about saying yes to God. Even when you don't understand everything, just say yes to God. It's the very best thing we can do to experience His presence in our lives. Now, we started this series by learning that you need to surrender your will every single day. Jesus said, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow Him. Take up their cross daily. He threw in that word daily just so that we would know every day we need to surrender our will to Him. And so we've been learning a prayer together. Some of us have been praying it. And so I want to ask you, it's on the back of your insert. We'll have it on the screen here. Would you just pray this prayer with me today? Okay, ready? Let's go. Go. Heavenly Father, I surrender myself to you. My hands, my feet, my eyes, my ears, my thoughts and desires, my hopes and dreams, my talent and opportunities, I surrender all. Your will be done through me today. Amen. I promise you that if you make this your daily prayer, God will begin to speak to you in some ways maybe that He hasn't for a while or you haven't heard. When your eyes start to wander, when your feet start to wander, when your hands start to do things that God never intended for you to do, He'll say, hey, what are you doing? Just like I do with my grandson sometimes when they're doing things that they know. What are you doing? Oh, nothing. Right. A couple of weeks ago, we learned to pay attention to what's going on inside, in your heart, because everything that we do flows from our heart. There are certain seeds that very easily get planted in our hearts, and if those seeds are left unattended, they begin to grow, and eventually they destroy us. Seeds like guilt and anger and greed and jealousy. They don't add anything good to our lives, but they take up so much time and they take so much away from us. So we surrender every day. We pay attention to what's going on. Are you mad at somebody today? Are you? Is there something that you're really hanging on to? In fact, that was the last week we talked about don't be a Klingon, and we said no, not a Star Trek Klingon. This is a Klingon, the kind of person who grips on to what they have, and they never want to let go of it. And John the Baptist was our example last week, as he taught us by his example. He said, a person can receive only what is given them from heaven. None of us got to choose where we were born or who our parents would be or 1,000 other variables in our life. How tall we would be, how short we would be, how big we would be, how fast we would be. None of us got to choose those things. They've been determined by heaven. Even every breath that we take is a gift from heaven. But see, we forget that. You're breathing right now, and it's just like, well, I do that. I can do that on my own. Oh, no, you can't. Oh, no, you can't. That's a gift from God. So there's no room for pride in our lives. There's no need for fear because God's got it all under control. And he says, put your trust in me. Would you just say yes to me? It'll make all the difference. Now Jesus' agenda for his followers is that we would not be simply people who believe in things, but that we would be people who had a very active, all-in, gritty faith daily. That's why his invitation is to follow me. I want you to live and respond and react like I do. Now, over time, and maybe you were a part of this, over time, the church pulled back from Jesus' call to follow me and simply reduced it to believe in me. Just believe with me. Well, I believe. I'm not going to do that. But I mean, I believe in God. Isn't that the right answer? Well, I believe there's a God. I believe. I'm a believer. I'm not going to do what he says. I mean, I'm not going to be a Jesus freak. I'm not going to forgive people if they burn me. I'll get them back. I mean, I'm not going to do what he says, but I believe. And Jesus never called anybody to simply believe. But follow me became too difficult. And so believe in me left loopholes. And we like loopholes, don't we? Well, I'm going to follow Jesus sometimes, if it's convenient. If I like the new pastor. Yeah. But I'm not going to do, everything that Jesus said. I mean, that's ridiculous. Nobody does that. I believe, but I'm not going to forgive that person. I know Jesus said you're never supposed to forgive. I'm going to do that. I believe, but I'm not going to do what Jesus modeled and told me to do. Jesus did invite people to believe in him, but he never intended for that to stop there. Believe in me was basically the threshold to follow me. In fact, it's interesting, Jesus invited people to follow him before he invited them to believe in him. It's kind of one of those, well, taste and see. Come and see. Follow me. Because the follow part was the active part. The follow part is what he knew would ultimately build and confirm our belief in him. But believe, just to believe is easy. Much easier than following, right? Because believe, it's safer. It's less demanding. It doesn't require us really to change at all. Oh, I believe. Really? You believe? Okay. You just make a decision in your head. That's not what Jesus invited us to do. He didn't invite us just to simply believe true things. He invited us to live a life that reflects an awesome, bold confidence in God because he's on the move. So the question he asks us today is, what would I do if I was absolutely confident that God was actually with me? What would I do? How would I respond when things happen in my life? How would I react? How would I live? And you might say, well, that would take a lot more faith than what I have. So how does our faith grow? If God wants our faith to grow, what things happen in our lives? A couple things. Our faith grows when our faith intersects with God's faithfulness. Great is his faithfulness. You experience his faithfulness, and it'll change your life. When we step out and do what we think God wants us to do with no guarantee of how things are going to turn out, and then after we do that, after we step out and obey God, whatever that is, then we experience God's faithfulness on the back end. You know what happens to us? Our faith grows. Well, if God can do that, well, maybe he can do... Well, if God did that, I remember when he did that, and maybe he can do... It's like a muscle. If you don't exercise it, it doesn't grow. But when we experience God's faithfulness, after we have put our trust in him, we actually experience God. And I know that would be some of your testimonies as I look around this room. God has touched some of your lives, hasn't he? And you can bank on that. You can trust in God's faithfulness. For many of us, there are moments, there are stories that we think back, and when we tell those stories, it kind of gets emotional for us. And we kind of have to suck it up. Because there are times in our lives where we just felt the internal nudge from God. Kind of a whoosh feeling. Somebody close to me says that. Maybe we knew we needed to apologize, or we needed to write a letter, or we needed to join that life group or that rooted group. Do you remember that? And you didn't want to do that, and then you did, and it was like, well, God showed up, and it was the greatest thing. I'm so glad I did. Maybe you felt God nudging you to be more generous, and you needed to do whatever that God called us to do. And we didn't know how it was going to turn out, but we just walked by faith. Okay, God, I think this is what you want me to do, so I'm going to do this. We didn't have the time, we didn't have the money, but we did it anyway. And on the back end, God showed up. And he did something that we couldn't anticipate. And we'll never forget those moments. Our confidence in God at that time grows just a little bit more. Is that your story? I know it's mine. Along with that, another way that our faith grows is when we push through our inadequacies to say yes to God. The first time that you step out of your comfort zone to serve someone else, and in a way you didn't feel prepared for it, you didn't feel adequate, but you just knew there was something inside of you, you felt the nudge from God, wouldn't you just go ahead and do that? And God showed up, and your faith grew. And now you're doing stuff that you never dreamed you would do. What is that about? Because God showed up. I was so nervous. I was in over my head. I don't even know the Bible that well, and here I am teaching it. I felt inadequate. I felt unqualified. I didn't know what was going to happen. I just knew that's what God was nudging me to do, and so I did it, and then God showed up. And the reason this part of our story this is part of our story is not because we're so great. The reason it's part of our story is because on the other side of that decision, we experienced God's faithfulness and God's provision, and God used us in someone else's life. I'm hearing some of those stories nowadays. Thank you for sharing that I got the privilege to be a part of some of your lives, and for the most part in a positive way, unless you're my family, then in a negative way sometimes too. But something inside you, when you realize that God's used you to make a difference in somebody else's life, I keep telling you, I'm surprised that anybody comes to hear me on Sunday morning. I mean, because I wouldn't come hear me. I know me. I'm not going to do it. But God uses, and it's not about me. And you're soon to find that out, because I won't be here, but somebody else will. And God will be in the house every time we meet. And our faith grows strong, and our faith gets us through the next challenge that we go through. Now, again, some of you are right at that point today, and you're probably saying, did you look at my email? Did somebody send you this? Because that's right where I'm at. You're feeling the nudge, but you're scared. You're feeling the nudge, but you don't have time. Life is too busy. You just don't have time. Wait till you retire. Then you'll have time. I'm too old. I can't do that. I'm too old. You ever used that one? Some of us? I'm too young. I don't know enough about the Bible or whatever. Whatever it is, if you will push through that, you will experience God's faithfulness and your faith will grow. And your story will include, I didn't want to do that, and I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to show up for that. I didn't want to, but I did, and God met me there, and my life changed. Now, here's the other thing about this. You have no idea what God might do through you if you say yes to Him. Absolutely no idea. When I left Moses Lake the first time, I didn't want to leave Moses Lake the first time. I had a girlfriend. Life was going to be fine. I was teaching flying out of Big Bend, earning $800 a month. I was like in Fat City. Big money back then. I'll tell you what, most money I ever wore a tie to work. You had to wear a tie. They called me Mr. Burns. Huh? Yeah. But God had other plans. And former pastor Jack Dellamorter called and said, "What are you doing with your life?" I said, I'm flying. Got a girlfriend. He said, "Would you be interested in coming down to Oregon? George Fox College." I said, "What's a George Fox College? I'd never heard of it before." Moved down there, spent a couple of years down there, met my wonderful bride down there. And we got married and stayed there for 14 years of wonderful ministry down there. And I mean, who'd have thunk, what's going on? And then after that time down there, it was kind of like, it's time to move on. And I'm thinking, no, it's not my fault. Our senior pastor at that point had kind of an emotional breakdown thing. And so it was like, it's time for a change. And I'm thinking, I don't want to change. I want to stay right here. And with the leadership and everything, they decided that the best thing for me was to go to a little town in central Washington called Quincy. Yeah, the land of opportunities unlimited. The big Q. Do you know what Quincy was for me? I grew up here in Moses Lake. Quincy was the stoplight on the way to Wenatchee. There was nothing in Quincy. And you know what I felt like? I felt like God somehow was punishing me. I did something wrong. He's going to send me out to this little jerkwater town to die. I must have done something wrong. Really, that's how I felt. It's like, what in the world? And yet those 14 years that we were in Quincy were phenomenal. Many, many lives were changed. Some of them are sitting here. You guys are getting older. You know that? I don't know if you are aware of that. Some of you on my behind the neighbors. God just did some amazing. Our kids grew up there and had a wonderful experience, and God knew exactly what He was doing. 14 years after that, we received a call to go down to Boise, Idaho area, and so we said no 3 times. No. And we did this. I know we did something stupid. It's kind of, okay, let's go check it out. I mean, if God's in this, okay. So we kind of jokingly prayed this prayer, God, okay. The name of the place that was inviting us was Deer Flat, Idaho. It's kind of like, what? What's a deer flat? So we said, okay, if we see a flat deer on the road on the way there, guess what we saw in George, between George and Vantage? A dead deer on the road. It was like, are you kidding me? So, brother. So anyway, we go down there, end up, that's where we believe God's calling us. We go down there and get killed. Hundreds of people, big church, hundreds of people came to know Christ. We baptized, I think, 250 people in the 4 years that we were there. But then they just decided, we don't want you here anymore. just destroyed me. You what? You don't want me. You don't want me here anymore. You don't want us here anymore. It was just a devastating experience. Horrible. I just decided I was going to go drive a truck. We talked about driving a UPS truck or something. My dad drove Safeway. I'm going to drive a truck. I'm out of this ministry. It'll destroy you. So after processing that for a year, we started a church in a movie theater in a little town called Moses Lake, Washington. Huh? Whew. Yeah. 15 years. 15 years. God has been very, very faithful to us for 15 years. So when people say, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're going to hang around? You're going to what are you going to do? I don't know, but I know God's faithful. And I know the best is yet to come because God's on the move. So whatever it looks like, I'm excited, and I want to challenge you and encourage you to be excited about what He can do, is going to do in your life too, as you trust Him. Now, I want you to see how Jesus taught this to His first followers. Again, very familiar story. You know the story, so when I talk about it, you don't go, I already know that story. I'm not going to listen, because I think maybe there's some new truth that we need to apply today. Now, all four Gospels record this story. It's very important. I'm sure it impacted all of the disciples. Jesus had been teaching this in the crowd all day long. Thousands of people gathered around to hear Jesus. So if you can put yourself in that picture, I mean, they're sitting outside. You know what, outside and the elements and everything. And you get tired and hot and sweaty and thirsty. And so they're out there, and as evening approaches, it's dinner time. But there are no restaurants in the area, no facilities. And so Jesus' followers, like we all do, we come up with a plan to take care of the problem. And so we go tell Jesus what to do. Jesus, if you just go ahead and do this, everything will be just fine. Because, after all, I know what's best. You ever tell Jesus that? Okay. But Jesus had a different plan. He invites them to be a part of the solution. So here's the situation in Matthew 14. And when Jesus invites them to be a part of the solution, you know what? Jesus always does that. We tell Him what to do, and He says, why don't you come? Why don't you get involved with that? Why don't you do that? Matthew 14. As evening approached, the disciples came to Him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus replied, "They don't need to go away. You give them something to eat." So the disciples asked Jesus to do something, and Jesus turns around and asks them to do something. That's just the way Jesus does things. Have you learned that yet? You will. You will. He invites them to be a part of the solution, but what He asks them to do is impossible. There's no way they can do this. Thousands of people, right? Thousands of people. And John wrote in his gospel that Jesus said this to test them. He knew they couldn't do it. He knew that they didn't have what it takes to do what He was asking them to do. This was a test. It's only a test. He was trying to teach them to trust Him to do what only He could do. You going to trust me with this, or are you going to take care of it on their own? And they respond like you and I do. They say, "We can't do that. We can't do it." Verse 17, we have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And we got thousands of people. Jesus, do you see the problem here? There's a little problem here, Jesus. Now Andrew, one of the disciples, found a kid And this kid brought his lunch bag, probably about this big. I don't know that it had Spider-Man on it, but thanks, Malachi, for letting me use your little lunch bag. A little lunch bag like this is all they had. Thousands of people. And they had this. 5 little loaves of bread, little rolls, and 2 little fish in a lunch bag. That's all they had. I love what Jesus says next. This is how big problems are solved. This is how church-wide problems are solved. This is how community-wide problems are solved. In fact, this is how nation-wide problems are addressed. And this is an invitation to all of us. He says, bring me what you got. Just bring me what you got. Matthew 14, verse 18, bring them here to me. Just bring me what you drink. You got that? Just go ahead and bring that. You just bring me what you got. I know it's not much, but bring it to me. Let's see if maybe I can do something. Maybe. And there I stand. And there you stand. With our loaves, with our fish. Some of you have more loaves than you have fish. Some of you have more fish than you have loaves. We don't all have the same resources. We don't all have the same abilities. But we all got a little something. And every single Jesus follower is invited to bring him what you got. Not what you don't have. Bring him what you got. Jesus would say, do you want me to do something? I want you to be involved. I want you to participate. He would say, do you want me to do something big? Do you need me to do something big? Have you been praying for a change in your family, in your church, at work, in your neighborhood? I want you to participate. So you bring to me what you have. Is something breaking your heart? Bring it to me. Bring me what you got. Here's what Jesus wants us to learn. And if you get nothing else out of this, maybe write this down, because this will change the way you live your life. If we can learn this. I'll do what I can do and trust God to do what only He can do. I'll do what I can do and trust God to do what only He can do. Would you say that with me just real quick? Here we go. Ready? Go. I'll do what I can do and trust God to do what only He can do. A life changer. So there they stand. Thousands of people on the hillside. Sun's starting to go down. And they got one Spider-Man lunchbox. 5 loaves, 2 fish. And Jesus does what He always does. And He uses them to meet that need. Look at verse 19. And He directed the people to sit down. And the disciples, you got to know, don't you? I mean, if you're one of those guys going, oh, this ought to be good. Okay, everybody, sit down. I got a lunch. Can't you imagine the disciples kind of looking at each other like, now what's going to happen? This is going to be really embarrassing. Here, we can feed part of one person. Now, He directed the people to sit down on the grass, taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, He gave thanks and broke the loaves. He gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. He could have just rained bread down from heaven. He did that once in the Old Testament. Remember the manna from heaven? He could have done that. Well, what's the deal here? He hands it to the guys, and they hand it out to all the people. Now, I'm sure, again, put yourself in the story if you can. I'm sure that his prayer was a prayer when he looked up and gave thanks. What do you think that was? Well, I think his prayer was just like the prayer he prayed when he was standing outside the tomb of Lazarus. Do you remember that? What a cool prayer. And he said basically, "Dear Heavenly Father, you know what's about to happen, but I just want them to know what's going to happen. And I want them to know that you and I are connected." So, okay, here we go. And boom, Lazarus comes out of the dead. It's like, everybody's going. So here, that's the kind of prayer. That's what this prayer is like. Father, you know what's about to happen. You know we got one sack lunch here. I just want everybody to know that you, through me doing this, we're going to see something really. So here we go. And boom! And they're handing out bread, and they're handing out more bread. And where's this bread coming from? You got to know the disciples were just giddy. Oh, look at it. There's so much of it. He gave the food to them. They handed it out. They did what they knew how to do. Did they make the bread? Did they multiply it? No. They handed it out. They did what they knew how to do and trusted that Jesus knew what he was up to. That's it. And they walked into that crowd with whatever it is that Jesus had placed into their hands. It's just a reminder of God's provision. And then look at how this story ends. They each received a basket full of blessings. And again, all four gospel writers write this. All four of them don't write every story, everything that's told, but all four of them write about this. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. Do you know how many original disciples there were? How many? 12. And how many basketfuls? 12. Yeah, they each got a basketful. Just as a reminder. God will bless you if you say yes to him. Now, again, this whole concept is so personal for me. And I want it to be personal for you too. It's so personal for me when I talk about it in this very room, because 15 years ago, a small group of us met together in our home and felt the nudge to start a different kind of church. We wanted to start a church that unchurched people would actually attend and want to bring their friends. We wanted to create a church that didn't have expectations of what to wear or what you had to say, and it was okay to eat popcorn in church. Well, we came up with that one because we started in a movie theater, and so popcorn, they made it for us. It's like, well, free popcorn. Hello! And we never stopped. Paul's still making popcorn every week. What is that all about? Yeah. We wanted people who were far from God to come and hear that God was for them, not out to get them. So Larry King, Tara King, kind of kicking and screaming, I think, a little bit when you hear their story. And some of you started coming out of the blue. Just started coming, started showing up. Church in a movie theater? Come on, you can't do that. Jesus didn't do that. It was a big, just bring me what you got. No building, no people, nothing. We didn't have anything. We bought that projector to show on the big screen. In fact, today the bulbs burn out of that projector. It's kind of like we had to put in new bulbs for the projector because, it's only 15 years old. So, and here we are. Never thought we'd be in a church building, but we've got 7.5 acres to do what it is that God wants us to do, whatever that is. It's how God works. It's how communities change. It's how the world changes. One lunchbox at a time. So what you got? What you got to? I don't have much. What is it? Bring that. Yeah, but I can't. I'm not very good. I'm too. I can't. Oh no, I'm no good. I can't. Just whatever it is. Bring in what you got. Saying yes to God allows us to experience God's power in our weakness and God's faithfulness when we trust Him. He knows what He's doing. So will you say yes to Him? God's power in your weakness, God's faithfulness when we trust Him. So as we wrap up today, I want you to say again with me that little statement that we made earlier, and then I'm going to give you a minute to reflect on that to see what that looks like for you, and then we'll wrap up today and I'll pray. So would you do that? I'll put it up on the screen for you. So would you just say this with me? Everybody ready? Go. I'll do what I can do and trust God to do what only He can do. Now take a minute, and maybe the Holy Spirit will whisper to you, that's what I want you to do. You know that, don't you? I'm nudging you to do that. Take that step. That's it. That one. Yeah, that one you're feeling, right? That one. And then just to say, God, I'll do whatever you want me to do. So the question is, what's your next right step? Whatever the Lord whispers to you right now. Let's take a minute, and then I'll come back and pray, okay? Lord, I pray that today you would help us to say yes to you so that we can experience your power in our weakness and your faithfulness as we trust you. God, I pray that you would help us to remember that the blessings come on the backside of obedience. When we obey you, when we do what you're calling us, asking us, nudging us to do, then the blessings flow. And just like the disciples each got a basket full from this one little lunch left over to remind them of what you were up to and that this was all about you. Lord, I pray that you would help us not to seek the blessing, but to seek the obedience, so then I know the blessings come. They always do. We can't outgive you. So Lord, I pray that again that you would help us to do, each one of us to do what we can do and to trust you to do what only you can do. And not to try to do your part for you, not to tell you what to do, but just to trust you. So Lord, thank you. Thank you for that next right step that you have reminded us, you've nudged us about today. Help us to do that. Help us to say yes to you. And we pray all these things in Jesus' name. And everybody said, Amen. Amen.